Hi, I'm Michael LaFosse from the Origami Do Studio, and this lesson is about wet folding, and I'm using a collaborative design called Elsa's Swan. Elsa Chen, a very good friend of ours, designed a base swan, and then I added a few other details to it, and we came up with this nice little three-dimensional model. And it's folded from ordinary printer paper, 8.5 by 11 or A4, and then trimmed to the largest possible square. And it's wet folded. Wet folding is a technique that you'll certainly want to know more about because it helps you to make more permanent designs and also beautiful shaping. When paper is dry folded, the creases that you put in there actually weaken the paper because it breaks the plant fibers, snaps them like straws. If you add moisture, those bend, and then when the paper dries, those fibers maintain their integrity. And a lot of Western papers have some kind of stiffening size in there, which is very rigid when it's dry, but when you moisten it slightly with water, it becomes yielding. Again, when it dries, it hardens back up. And so the paper origami models will keep their shape much longer. Paper needs to be moistened on both sides. Let's take a look at how I'm going to moisten this paper and see what happens. I'm using a spray bottle set on a light misting spray, and I'm going to spray the area, and then using a soft china bristle brush, a dry brush, I'm going to brush the droplets all around because they need to be spread out to get over the entire area of the paper. Okay, so it's wet, but look what's happening. It's curling. That's because the wet side of the paper is actually becoming wider as the fibers on that side swell first, while the dry side has still the original size. So we have a difference in size of edges. To balance that out, we always moisten the other side. And as soon as the water hits that, you can see how the paper is relaxing flat again. Also, brushing the paper so that the droplets of water go all over. Now, the biggest mistake most people make when they start their experiments with wet folding is putting too much water. Ultimately, the paper should feel cool to the touch. It should be yielding and soft, but it shouldn't look or feel wet. And so it's always a good idea to have handy a dry cloth that you can blot any excess up if you put too much water in. With time, you'll experiment and you'll know how to wet each different kind of paper. Some papers are more thirsty than others. Okay, now another way that you could apply water is with a moistened cloth. If you do that, you're going to be swiping along, but be careful not to press too hard because you'll make the paper fuzzy. And again, you can always use a dry cloth if you put too much water. Okay, let's begin. We're going to make Elsa's Swan. This paper was cut perfectly square originally. Because it's expanded with water, it's going to be a little bit off. And so whenever you wet fold, you're going to make your folds a little bit differently. I'm going to fold this in half to make a triangle, but I am not going to match the two opposite corners. If I try to do that, because the paper's expanded, look what happens down here. You see where it's going? That's because my paper is not an equilateral form anymore. What I need to do is to put a valley crease between these two corners. So when I fold the paper, I'm going to focus my attention on the crease spanning between the two corners. Like that. So that was successful. And you can see that these two corners at the top do not match. Again, that's because the paper is expanded. I really don't care if those don't match. What I really need to care about is that that crease runs between those two corners. Okay, now we're going to make a kite base. I'm going to open the paper. Notice I have the mountain side up, the mountain crease side up. And I'm going to go ahead and fold one of the square edges to the crease. And use the pads of your fingers to place your fold so that you don't scar the paper. The paper is soft and it can easily be scarred. I'm going to go to the other side and finish the kite by bringing the opposite edge, the adjacent edge, actually they're connected by a common corner. Again, I'm more concerned about making a nice point but I'm not concerned about these corners matching. When the paper dries, everything is actually going to pull into correct form again later on, but you have to be aware of these adjustments as you go. Don't worry that those two corners are not together. Let's turn the paper over to the other side and use the valley crease, which is already there, and simply fold the kite in half. This is just to make sure that everything's going well. Okay, I'm going to open the paper again. This is the kite side where the flaps are not showing. I'm going to put some pre-creases into the narrow corner of the kite. This will help when I want to begin to fold the neck. So I'm going to bring the edge to the crease. I'm not going to fold all the way across. I'm going to simply fold from about the middle out to the acute corner. So you see I have an unfinished crease. It stops there. Let's go ahead and do the same thing to the other side. The edge goes to the valley crease in the center, like that. So we've got those pre-creases. They're valley creases and they're on the inside of the paper. Let's go ahead now and fold the kite back in half and see what happened. Here we have those stopping creases. And here's what that works to do. It lets me squash fold this narrow point. Like that. So I've got this paper for the neck. And this is where we want to get the paper off the table. Wet folding is more lively and more effective when it's not been flattened on the table. So always lift it off. Round in here, bend to make an inside reverse fold, and flatten the narrow end of the point. We want to leave a nice open shape in the front. And you can adjust the angle for the neck any way you wish. I'm going to make a nice big inside reverse fold for this point so that I can form the tail eventually. I'm going to inside reverse fold here, bring this right down. These are all rat folds. Remember, R-A-T in English and origami means right about there. So as you're doing your folding, you're actually judging your shapes and proportions to complete your form. Something like this. Now, inside here you can see things are a little bit more amorphous, and I'm going to define them better before I go ahead and set the crease. I'm going to line up these edges at the back. And just gentle folding. Wet folding can be kind of delicate. I'm going to now inside reverse fold this big corner up. I'm opening. I'm inside reverse folding up. And I'm going to pull the paper until I get a nice clean corner at the back end here. Like this. There and there. And then I can set the folds inside. Okay. This flap, which is above the folded edge there, can be squash folded. And that's going to lock the back end of the swan. So I can make a base hinge like this, folding it over on one side, and then making that base hinge flexible by folding it back over on the other edge there. Open the cone and squash. I'm taking the spine of the squash to align with the middle of the split. And so I have this nice covering shape that locks the back of the swan. And this looks very boxy and bulky back here, so one of my design choices was to take the backside raw edges and fold them inside. Notice how I'm handling the paper in the air. I'm also rotating the paper so it's comfortable for me to fold essentially away from me, like this. I want to leave enough of a length here for the base of the swan and a graceful taper towards the back. Let's see what that looks like. That's nice. Okay, let's do the other side to match. To match the other side, I'm going to use the first side. I'm going to do a pre-crease, and then I'm going to separate them and then tuck it inside. Like that. We can finish the swan now by finishing what we've started in the front. In your diagrams, for efficiency of diagramming, we've combined the neck folding with the back end folding in certain steps. Don't worry about that. What you need to do is to learn the model dry folding first so you know it by heart. Then you can take a wet folded paper attempt where you've already memorized it, you know what you're doing, and then you can go ahead and fold the whole thing right through. It's like rehearsing for a performance. I'm going to do an inside reverse fold that makes a fairly long angle here. Okay, so you can see I've got the neck coming back and then it's going up before it outside reverse folds at the top to begin to form the head. About like that. So we have this nice little interesting bend here. And then to make the beak separate from the head, we can flatten the tip, and I'm making a crimp here. It's a mountain and valley combination. Mountain on top, valley underneath, and then push, and then valley fold the whole thing in half from underneath. That's the basic shape. While the paper is pliable and malleable here, I guess you could say, you can actually put some graceful curving, and you can go back and refine any of the shapes that you think need to be addressed. So for instance, here there was a pucker. I'm going to reach inside and get rid of that. And there we have it. Elsa's swan. You're going to need to leave it alone for a few hours or overnight to dry. And then the next day, you're going to find that this swan is going to be quite solid and the folds will stay for a good long time. That's basic wet folding. Elsa's swan.